Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Yes Dear podcast. My name is Dana Lyons. I'm here with my husband, Patrick. And today we're going to talk about justice versus intimacy, right?
Mhm. Yes, ma'am. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
dear. Yes,
Yes,
dear.
dear. Like it. Like it. Yeah, I think that's really one, we want to clarify something, right? We want to clarify something from the last one. And
Yes.
two, I think this is a good place to go just from the last one that we were in,
Yeah.
the marriage model.
Yeah. So as I was listening to the last episode, um, we ended talking about right, looking for a reason, trying to find a reason for why you would want to hang in there. Um,
Yeah.
and we, Dana, very passionately, you were saying, like, do it for the kids, like fight, do it, do the work, do it for the kids. And I just wanted, as I was listening to that, I thought what I don't want, and I know the same for you, Dana. We don't ever want anyone to hear that and think, oh, I just gotta suck it up and be unhappy and but I have to stay here for the kids because that's what's best for them. And that's what these podcasters told us. No, like that is so not what we
No.
mean. What we mean is stay together and work on it and find intimacy, like make it the marriage that you've always dreamed of. Make it, as Dana, as you've said in prior episodes, make it better than it's ever been. Do
Yeah.
that for the kids.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because I think couples that think they're just going to stay together for the kids and stay in withdrawal. We've talked about withdrawal, or stay in conflict, but they don't want to get divorced because they don't want to mess up the kids' lives. They don't understand. They really are impacting the kids' lives. Like the kids see it. I don't care if we think we're hiding it. The
Yeah.
kids know. They know when we're not where we're supposed to be. They know when we're in withdrawal. We're not in intimacy. So the best thing you can do for the kids is not stay together and be unhappy for them, but stay together and model it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we think we're doing right by just staying together, like, and you hear it so often, especially in marriage ministry. It's like, oh, well, we've been together for the kids, we've done everything for the kids, and we just don't have it. And so they go off to college, and then a lot of sometimes it doesn't even make it that far. But then they get divorced because it's like, well, we only stayed together for the kids,
Yes.
and we're not saying that because your kids pick up on that, and someday your kids will say, parents hated each other. They stayed together for us, but so that's really not what we're saying.
Yeah. And I would even say, and we know this from, it's funny when couples stay together for the kids and they're just surviving, they're not thriving for the kids. When they stay together for the kids, to your point, then when the kids are gone, they have nothing, they have no reason to stay together
Yeah.
and they divorce. And here's the lie. We've talked to adults whose parents got divorced after the kids were all out of the house. And if the parents think it's easier because they're adults,
Yeah,
that's a lie. It still sucks no matter how old you are.
it does. And not only that, or the flip side is they think they have to stay together and they stay together and they're not even roommates. They're like in the same house. I hear these stories all the time. You're like, we haven't slept in the same bed
Yeah.
in 30 years. We live there and we'll never get divorced. But if I could, I would. I don't. And that's not what we're saying either. And on the flip side, I also want to address this since you're going here, is what I'm also not saying is stay somewhere where you're not safe. If there's abuse, if there's neglect and it's not safe for you, I'm not saying tough it out because here's what a lot of times with codependent people who struggle with codependency, like I gotta hang in there and I have to be the doormat and I'm gonna love them and it's gonna change and they try everything but they lose themselves, like
Mhm.
literally lose themselves. So I'm not saying stay in there if you're not in a safe place and if you're being abused, but I'm not saying that. I've been through a divorce. I'm not here judging by any means. But what I am saying is it's speaking to those couples that are in this chronic state of just um, complacency and
unhappiness.
withdrawal, and
Yeah.
a lot of times it's just these little tweaks, and your marriage could literally just take off and be what you dreamed it
Yeah.
would have been. So
And the last thing I'll say on it is, again, when you stay together for the if that's what you're doing right now, if you're listening and you're staying together for the kids and you think you're helping them,
yeah,
they are watching everything that you do and they are learning. Like, think of this as classroom time for them.
that's
They're
right.
watching. Your sons are watching and they're learning how they should treat their wives, or they're watching how they should expect to be treated by their wives. And your daughters are learning how they should expect to be treated by their husbands, or how they should treat their husbands. So why not have that thriving marriage, like build that, get out of withdrawal,
Mhm.
do conflict in healthy ways. You're like, that is a gift that your kids will carry with them for the decades of their own marriage.
Yeah.
It's I just wanted to clarify that, because as I was thinking, as I was listening, I thought it's an important message that people hear. We are so not saying be unhappy, but do that for the kids. It's the exact opposite. For Pete's sake, fight for your kids by making your marriage awesome.
Yeah. Because wouldn't you say, like, we do say this together, like, thanks for fighting for us when I
Yeah.
wasn't. Thanks for hanging in there and loving me. Really, when I wasn't lovable, or you weren't lovable, how we would rate it, like
Yeah.
when I was giving nothing. And yet we could both say, yes, we fought for it. And it was so worth it, because we
Yes.
easily could have just got out of it, because it was like,
Yeah.
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 So anyway,
Yes. Okay. So we're done.
are you done?
Uh, yes, dear.
Yay! High five. You're learning.
I meant with the episode, but
Yes.
so
No,
no,
you,
no, no, we're just done with that topic.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what are we talking about today?
So let's dive into justice and
Mm,
intimacy.
justice. Yes.
Mhm. So, okay, struggling marriages. Let's just say every marriage goes through struggles. There is no marriage that has never ever struggled. Um, every couple goes through it. Some are bigger struggles than others. Um, Nobody's exempt. We all, whether it's intentional or unintentional, we hurt each other. We disappoint each other. We don't show up for one another. We could get really selfish. And sometimes it's not like it's an unintentional. We could just get wrapped up in our own thing, not realizing we just hurt the other person. And some are some really deep things. And in that, we start creating like a history of, and I would say, mm, I don't say baggage, but just a history of hurt and pain that starts
Mhm.
piling up and piling up. And now, if they're like me, I stuffed it all. And it was like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. Or we try, can't say it was the best communication, but, and then it felt unsafe. So I stuffed it, and it just kept stuffing, stuffing, stuffing until I had so much anger. And I was convinced this ain't working.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. So it's funny. I literally just had the same conversation and on a coaching call this morning. You're talking about the stuffing piece. Um, we don't say to ourselves, right? I know you're not saying this. We don't say to
Mhm.
ourselves, I'm just going to stuff this. What we say is, I'm just going to let this go. I'm just going to let this go. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to let this go. Do you know
Mhm.
what we suck at? We suck at just letting this go.
Mhm.
Nobody ever just lets it go.
Yeah.
What we do is really what I'm just going to let this go means is, I'm just not going to do anything about it now.
Right.
I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to, we're not going to talk about it. I'm just going to put this back here, and I'm gonna let it go. But I didn't let it go.
Mhm.
It's going in the same pile as the last thing that I let go, and it's where the next thing that I'm gonna let go is gonna go. And eventually, when that pile becomes huge, what am I going to do? You're going to do one thing, you're going
Yeah.
to do a little thing, and it's going to set me off. And what am I going to say? You always do that. You
Yep.
never do this.
Hmm.
And you're going to say, what, wait, what? And I'm going to go, well, I'm going to start taking those things off the pile. And I'm going to say, you did it here in September. You did it there when we were at your parents' house. You did it there at the school. So I didn't let any of that stuff go.
Yeah. For sure.
I'm putting it away for later, for the justice period. Like, at what point can I hold you accountable for all these things? That's when all that stuff is going to come out again.
Yeah, and sometimes stuffing, it really could be a learned behavior, right? We grew up in a culture, in our whole family culture, where you just don't talk about things. Well, what does that really mean? It's like you just don't deal with anything. The flip side to that could also be, we were in a relationship and it became not safe. Whether it's not safe because we perceive it not safe from our past prior to this,
Right.
or we just had really bad communication and made it not safe for each other to share. And then we just kept it inside. So yeah, I agree with you. It's also that not only am I not going to deal with it, I'm going to put it somewhere. It's like, I'm going to tuck it in this drawer right back here, and it
Right.
becomes our junk drawer, which stays here. And eventually you can't hold anything else in that junk drawer and it all comes out. Yeah. Hmm. So then what happens? Then it's shots fired, right? Then it's just like bam, 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 bam. It's like always, you never.
Yep.
Why? Well, I got a whole history to prove it.
Yeah. I always say, like, I know, again, you've, whether it's fear of bringing it up in the moment, or whether it's in some cases it's like, we think, I've heard this, like, well, I don't, he's having a bad day, I don't want to hit him with this, I don't want to, I don't want to add to his stress. Or again, maybe that's some of that is self-preservation fear. I don't want the wrath of, like, his anger or her anger. um we think, sometimes we think we're doing somebody a favor by just letting it go, but we're really not. We're storing it up. It's it's like storing up in the winter for a spring full of just hitting you over the head with 10 things that you did. And what's the first question you would ask is, well, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Why didn't you say that? I can't address 10 things at once, but you know what I can do? I can do one at a time. I'm
Hmm.
simple like that.
Yeah.
So it's about having those. Okay, but here's the question, because we're talking about justice. Um, do we need to, Dan, when do you I don't want to say hold someone accountable for those things?
Hmm.
Um, or maybe that's it. Do you here's a question, Dane, do you hold me accountable for everything that I do?
Well,
Every mistake that I make in our marriage? I mean, there's only been a few.
I mean, absolutely. Would you like, I got the book. I got it
Wow, that's
all.
a bigger book than I thought.
Yeah. You're in denial. No, just kidding. Um, well, I think there's a difference between, honestly, I think there's a difference between accountability and punishment,
Mm.
right? There's communication where we could say, hey, we talked about this. Like if we're having good communication, we can hold each other accountable to say, we talked about this. And when we talked about it, you said this, and we can hold each other accountable. And
Mhm.
you didn't you didn't do that, and and then we talk through that, and we
Right.
could talk about our frustrations, our disappointments, or what we expected, some of those things. That, to me, that's accountability. Takes you into a conversation where you can, then it helps you push through. When you're talking about punishment now, and I have to say I did this because it was very much um because I felt not safe, and I felt bombarded, not necessarily by you, but just past stuff. That if it takes a lot for me to come out and actually, I'm good until I explode.
Mhm.
And then when it comes out, it's all going to come out, right? Because you can only keep that lid closed for so long. And so to me, it was very much punishment. Punishment in that, whether it be my words, whether it be, you want to talk about that for just a second? Like punishment looks like it could be our words to each other, angry outbursts, right? We just speak some really nasty stuff to each other.
Yeah.
Could also be the silent treatment,
Yep.
or I just go really like dark. I just go quiet in myself. I don't know what to say. And if I open my mouth, it's not gonna be pretty. I'm afraid of my own anger, whatever it was. Um, Passive aggression, which I know we'll talk at another time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many different ways we punish each other, which never leads to intimacy, really, if we're
Yeah.
punishing,
Well,
right?
yeah. So in the episode that we talked about the marriage model, I think that was episode 4. That's the one just
What?
before this. When we talked about the marriage model,
Yeah.
we talked about the reason that couples go into withdrawal is because in that conflict state, they learn that it's unsafe.
Yeah.
And the reason you learn it's unsafe is because you're being punished. That's the word, right?
Yep.
I'm punishing you for having conversations with me about things that I don't like or I don't agree with, or things that are too,
How you feel.
yeah, exactly, all that stuff. So when I punish you, I think that's kind of that's why this episode is a natural springboard from the last one, because a lot of times I think the reason why we want to punish each other is we feel like we deserve justice. Like, you hurt me, and that, like, our whole society is built on the concept of justice, right? Justice and justice for all, right? Where when you do something that is counterculture, you are held, there are consequences,
Mhm.
right? That's justice. And nobody's arguing that that's a bad thing in society. I think what we're proposing is that's not necessarily a recipe for intimacy in your marriage.
Right. Mhm.
And so we often will ask the question, do you want justice or do you want intimacy?
That's right.
I think they are mutually exclusive. I don't think you can have justice and intimacy. I think it's an either or, and
Yeah.
it's a real honest question. But
Why
what
do
do
you
you
think
do?
why do you think it's either or?
Um, because here's my belief, my uh, imagery of justice. Right, justice is blind, meaning it's meaning everybody is held to the same standard. It Justice requires that there's a judge and a jury,
Mm.
right? That there are advocates on both sides of the argument, right? It justice assumes there is a right and a wrong, um, where someone is put on trial and they're found guilty. Well, then what happens? Then there needs to be a sentencing. There needs to be
Mhm.
punishment. There needs to be, like, they need to serve their time in order to, like, pay their debt to society. And again, all of that is very necessary when you're talking about a legal, like the laws and regulations
Yeah.
of of a land. But in our marriage, we don't have. I mean, I guess I was going to make a sweeping statement like we don't have laws and regulations in our. No, we do. Those laws, yes, there are. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, like, when there's disappointment or resentment, or when something doesn't go. We've talked about expectations. When you don't meet my expectations,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I get to put you on trial with a judge and a jury, and you have to advocate your position, and I get to counter my argument, and then there's a guilty verdict or not, and then there's a winner and a loser, and there's a sentencing. It just there's that just doesn't lead. At the end of that,
Yeah.
we're not going to go up and mess around, there's no intimacy. We're not gonna sit and cuddle and love on each other after that. You
Mhm.
walk away bitter and angry and resentful and frustrated.
Yeah. Well, I also think if you insist on justice, we're not looking for anybody else to be the judge, and we're not looking for the jury. We are both, and we want to skip right to punishment. It's
Sure.
like, you failed. Here is your punishment. You do that time, and then we'll talk.
Right.
Right? It's like we
Right.
say to couples all the time, if you really want him or her to pay for that thing that he did that's really so offensive to you, just nail him to the tree now. Like,
Yeah.
just hang him.
Yeah.
And how much better will you feel? And we say that because we punish, but we don't even realize the terrible, I mean, it does more damage than we realize. And here's what it was for me. And I don't know, some of the listeners might be right there. You can get so hurt. And some of this hurt that we bring into, a lot of the hurt we bring into marriage when we get married is not even from it's not from our spouse, it's from everything behind, that happened prior. So we bring all this hurt and pain that we haven't dealt with, that sometimes we don't even know what that is. We then project our fears of what, onto our spouse. Something happens and we're hurt. And for me, and I'm sure so many people listening, there is, over time, you can get so angry, right? There's a wrong that happened and it makes me angry.
Yeah.
And unless somebody owns the fact that they just did it, look, I hurt you, I'm sorry, or yeah, I was afraid and I lied, or if they don't just say that, we're left to stew in anger. And it's our choice to, but I know that. But I just was in so much anger. And then it hit me that I was afraid to let go of my anger because of why. Well, I couldn't really technically take you out and shoot you or hang you or punish you or pull your toes off and
And
rip your tongue out.
I am grateful for all of those things.
But what I found was that I couldn't let go of my anger, because then who will pay? And in my anger, I could make you pay, because for some of it, it was never acknowledged. Nobody said anything. And then I've been wronged. And who's going to acknowledge that?
Yeah. Somebody's
Just
got to pay.
say it. You got to validate that.
Yeah.
My bad. I did it. And therefore I can't move into intimacy because I'm protecting that.
Yeah. Any unresolved conflict or bitterness or resentment is, to me, there's just no room for that. Well, let me say it this way. When there is real intimacy, you're not holding on to that bitterness and resentment and fear and disappointment and right.
Mhm.
So I might argue there's just no room for, like, the two can't grow in the same garden.
Mhm.
The other thing about justice is, and you said as much, right? Because you're right. In a marriage, like in the court of law, there is a judge and a jury, and you have due process, and I can defend myself, and I have the right to see my accusers. That doesn't happen in a marriage. You're
No.
exactly right. So, like, I am the judge and the jury. I've already passed the sentence in my head, and I'm going to make you pay for it. But here's the other reality about justice. I said earlier, justice is blind. So that means if I'm putting you on trial for your war crimes, I have to be willing and ready to go on trial for my war crimes.
Mm.
And again, now it's like, so, what are we both? You just, I mean,
Just gonna duke it out.
yeah, yeah. It's like, and all of that is a distraction from what we need to be doing to actually be building intimacy, right? The intimate communication, the being students of each other, in that setting of justice. I'm myopic on how I was hurt,
Mhm.
instead of taking my eyes off of me and looking at you and asking, how can I better show up for you? How
Mhm.
can I serve you? How can I love you? How can I wow you today? Which, again, go back to why there can't be bitterness and resentment and frustration and anger toward you, because I'm not going to be wanting to serve you if, to your point, you want to rip my toes off. That's new to me. I had not heard that before.
Surprise.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm gonna sleep with boots on from this point on.
Mhm. Awesome.
Oh, what do you mean awesome?
No, well, okay, so but so then the flip side of that is if you could have justice or you could have intimacy, but you're not going to get both, right?
Yep.
One, we have to own, really, this comes to a place where being accountable, right? We are our biggest problem, and I can only be accountable for the things I do. One, it's owning where we mess up. Okay, some of it may be embarrassing and shame and hurt people, and you have to, there are consequences to some of those things, like how to make things right. You always want to make things right. How can I make it right? That's how there's a really a repentive heart. It's like, I'm sorry, or you know what, I did that to you and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What else, what can I do to make that right? Because you want to live at peace with all people, right? So that to me is a different heart. But to move out of, being able to let go of the justice that you feel it needs to happen is the sweetest gift that we each can give ourselves is forgiveness.
Right.
It's not that the other person ever deserves it. I mean, none of us really deserve it,
Right.
but it's giving it. And that's the other side of that's mercy. Mercy over judgment.
Yeah. So, okay, you once um, explained to me the difference between um, mercy and what was it?
Grace.
Mercy and grace. Yes,
Yeah.
mercy and grace. Talk about that because
Well,
that has stuck with me
yeah.
for years.
Yeah. Well, grace, we're either in this black and white, very legalistic, rigid way of living, and that's all about your behavior and what you do. Grace to me is all about receiving. It's God giving you what you don't deserve.
Hmm.
And we could do that with each other. I could give you what you don't deserve, right? A second chance, whatever. We could do that with each other. Mercy on the flip side of that is mercy is God not giving you what you really deserve.
Hmm.
So grace is giving you what you don't deserve, and mercy is not giving you what you really deserve.
Right. So go back to that court of law, right? Or in the court of marriage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, you did that. You hurt me. Right? Let's just lay out the facts, right? This happened. It disappointed me. It didn't meet my expectations. It was intentional or unintentional, right? You have that conversation.
Yeah.
You're on. Not that we're putting you on trial, but like you go through the trial, all the facts say, yeah, you did this, and yet when it comes time for the sentencing, there is no sentencing. Like that's what mercy is. It's like, yep, okay, that happened, and you are free to go. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean free to leave the marriage. I mean like you don't have to pay for this.
Yeah.
Mercy. Like I forgive you. You did it. I could hold you accountable, but as we talked about, then I have to be ready and willing to also go on trial. But like mercy is, hey, I'm sorry. Yes, you are forgiven.
Yeah. And most of the time, the people who are doing the hurting, right, the offender, oftentimes will like, why are you doing that? It really shocks the person because we are very used to justice. Like, I did it. I don't deserve forgiveness. I know you'll probably never talk to me again. I'm sure this is the end of us, and
Yeah.
all of that. I don't deserve whatever. And it's not about deserving grace. None of us deserve it. Mercy, none of us deserve it. But will we give it? Because it's the only way we could really move forward. And it's not to say, oh, brush everything under the carpet. Oh, as a Christian, I just got to forgive. And you're like, no, there are things we actually had to work through. There were conversations we needed to have. There was some resolution. Like there were things that we both had to do to make it right.
Right.
Whatever that, there is accountability. There is this great scene. And I just want to bring this movie in for just a second because it's a perfect, I love this. I found this movie. I wrote my first book and I refer to it. It's called, the movie Cinderella. And I refer to it in my book, No Longer Cinderella. And I bring this up because it's such a sweet example of forgiveness. So what I find inspiring is Cinderella's no different than us. She's got tons of hurt. There's tragedy. Life happens, right? And then she's got these mean people in her life. We all have them. And sometimes the meanest people in our own life is us. And so often we think it's our spouse, right? They hurt us. We've been through a lot. There's pain, right? All this kind of stuff. But what I love about the end of this story is that at the end, out of all the stuff that the evil stepmother and the evil stepsisters, the wicked stepsisters, do to Cinderella, the prince comes and pursues her, and the glass slipper fits her. And we know the end of the movie, right? But what I love about the 2015 version is it wraps up so good. And this is so key to our own life, is that at the end of that movie, she's about to leave with the prince because the shoe fits her and she's the chosen one, right? She's going to go live happily ever after. But before she could do that, she turns to the people who offended her over and over and over again. And there's a beautiful scene. This, the evil stepmother, she comes down that beautiful staircase. And before she goes to happily ever after and moves forward in life, she turns with no explanation. There was no justice necessarily made.
Mhm.
The stepmother did not say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, none of that. But Cinderella turns and goes, I forgive you. That's
Yep.
all she says. I forgive you. And then there's silence. And you could see in that movie how it hits the stepmother. And then the next scene is she turns and you could tell she walks out the door into her new life, happily ever after. It's the same. I love that because I always think of that when I think forgiveness, because you've got to be willing to be able to move past, to leave the past behind you and step into whatever the next phase of your marriage, let's just say
Mhm.
here, got to get to a place of forgiveness. And you might wrestle, might take some time, won't be that, oh, I just forgive you. No. But in order to move past, like to leave the past behind, you've got to forgive. It's a gift to yourself.
Yeah. Well, so I recently heard this again, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard this as well. Um, and that is right, unforgiveness, right? Resentment is like swallowing a poison pill and expecting the other person to die. I mean, all it does is it eats you up. I was talking about forgiveness this morning. Have you ever had someone come up to you and say, "Hey, I just gotta, I gotta clear the air with you because way back here when you said this, or when you did this, that really made me mad. It hurt my feelings. And I just didn't agree." And have you ever had that happen? And you're literally thinking, I don't even remember that.
Mhm.
Like, I don't. I what? And what do you do? Then you almost feel bad saying, "I'm sorry, I don't even remember that happening." But you apologize. But what does that suggest? That person has been stuck in that moment since it happened. Sometimes it's a few days, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's years
Yeah.
that you're holding on to that thing, your resentment, and that person has been sleeping soundly every night. They didn't even know. They didn't even remember. So forgiveness is not for the other person. It's not for the other person. It's the choice that I make to say, I'm not going to let this poison my soul. I'm not going to let this be a weight that I carry. I also say, since I was talking earlier, forgiveness is not the same as I'm just going to let this go. That is not forgiveness.
Yeah.
That is the opposite of forgiveness. That is, I'm going to hold on to this and use it at a time when it's beneficial to me.
Mhm.
Forgiveness truly means I am letting this go. I release I release you of any obligation to pay for it.
Yeah.
If you think about why can't we do that? Well, because you didn't apologize first. Well, you haven't paid for it first.
Yep.
Well, I'm not over it yet.
Yep.
Well, like, what do you do when the person who offended you is dead? Like,
Yep.
then what do you do?
Mhm.
You're never going to get unstuck if you're
Mhm.
waiting for an apology from a person who's not here anymore.
Yeah.
So and I also say this, you don't even have to tell the other person sometimes that you have forgiven them. Like if I call you, we haven't talked in 10 years, and I go, "Hey, I just want to tell you, Dane, I forgive you." And you're like, why would it make you go, what?
Yeah.
It's not even about that. It's more of an internal decision to say, I'm releasing this so that I can breathe again.
Yeah. Well, and I also think I totally agree with all that. what I also think is a lot of times, like you just said, sometimes somebody will say, I'm sorry, and they've been holding this for years, and you're like, I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
But also, I think when we offend people, here's what I want to say. So often we think in our pain that the other person is, and we'll just go spouse here, like the
Mhm.
other person's plotting to hurt us. Like I literally planned this out
Right.
and I'm going to hurt you. Everything from betrayal to total disappointment on something that they didn't show up on, and everything in between. And we think, how could you do that to me? And that's a process you go through as you're processing it. But so often I remember thinking this with some of the stuff that we went through. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like what, why would you do that to me? And whatever big or little it was. And yet here's the reality. The problem isn't that we're plotting against the other person to do harm to the other person. The problem is we're not thinking about the other person.
That's right.
Most of the time is we either it's unintentional, or we're actually just being selfish. And the
Mhm.
problem is we're not thinking of you, or I'm not thinking of the other person, or you're not thinking of me.
Yeah.
We're thinking of ourselves. And in the process, other people get hurt. It's not this evil plot.
Right. Yeah.
That's
I'm
why
not
some
looking
people
out.
that you say, like, I'm really hurt by you, and they don't relate. They're like,
Yeah.
that's not what I meant. And you're like, okay, because the problem is you just weren't thinking about me.
But I think again, you're exactly right. When the trust breaks down, we start thinking irrationally,
Yeah.
and we start to assume that you are waking up in the morning thinking, "How can I make husband's life miserable today?"
Yeah. Well, I do
You
that,
know,
but
yeah,
that's just my hobby. No.
huh? That's
Just kidding.
all right. Well,
It's like paintball, I mean,
is
just
that?
kidding.
I think we need help.
A
You know what,
little
hon?
pleasure and a little
You know what, Dave?
pain. No, I'm
Do you
just
know what?
kidding. Come on.
I forgive you.
You do?
I do.
Okay. All right, let's move forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Besides you,
Hmm.
very few people wake up in the morning thinking, how can I make my husband's life miserable today?
Hmm.
Right? That just doesn't happen. We think,
Yeah.
but they're now, to your point, they might be thinking, I don't, I'm not taking that person's care, that person into consideration. But that's, I don't know, that's different than I've got a master list of the things I'm going to do. And then really,
Hmm.
if you're to that point, well, I don't know. That's some work to do, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so forgiveness, is that really the answer? Is that like is that's to me that it's justice or intimacy? That's really the question that we all get to answer. Um, and is the answer, is the solution forgiveness? Is there anything more that you would suggest?
Well, I just think, we're all going to offend each other. We're all going to get hurt. We're all going to come against these things really that are roadblockers that keep us from moving forward as a couple. And if we don't move forward, intentionally choose to move forward, let me say it that way. If we don't intentionally do the things to move forward over time and we get stuck and then you get stagnant, then you're moving out of conflict and not fighting about it into this
Right.
withdrawal. And the problem with that is, like, how's that working for you? So if you're miserable and you're stuck here, to me, the only way I was able to move forward, and I'm sure there's other things, but forgiveness is key. Because as we work with couples, you're like, so much from the past comes up. So do you need justice? Then what's the punishment? And then will you move forward? Because then it usually does more harm than good. Or can you forgive and move towards intimacy? I think it's, what do you want? And if you want intimacy, then forgiveness is required, right?
Yeah, and really, when you're holding on to all of those, all the hurt and the bitterness and I mean, hurt not hurt, when you're holding on to all of those feelings, how much is how much, how many reparations do you need? Right?
Hmm.
How much do I need to make you pay before I finally go, okay, now you are forgiven, and let's be intimate. And I don't mean
Right.
again visit, but like let's like it just
And we're
doesn't.
close again.
Yeah, let's be close again,
Yeah.
right? Like
There's
it.
nothing close about the law, right? It's just so black and white.
No.
Yeah. And so it's really, what do you want? Because otherwise it's
Yeah,
going to hold you back.
and
And
so I think
that's not what you want.
so. But if we start to wrap this up, I think about you said earlier you talked about right fighting for each other.
Yeah.
So the a big inhibitor of forgiveness or a big need for justice is that you and I are on opposite sides of this fence or opposite sides of this argument, right? You hurt me, you were the victimizer, I was the victim, and right, we're on opposite sides,
Yeah.
opposite teams, and that's why there needs to be like we can't have there needs to be justice, or and I can't be forgiveness if we remember that the bigger picture we don't have to fight over every single like again like over the course of our marriage we're gonna have so many opportunities for
Yeah.
conflict
Yeah.
that we can either commit to work on fighting over every single one of them and right choosing sides, or we can remember the real fight is not with each other but for intimacy. We are fighting
That is,
together
yeah.
for intimacy. And if
Mhm.
we're fighting together for intimacy, we don't need to fight over all the little things. In fact, together we will fight against anything that we'll fight against justice if
Mhm.
we're fighting for intimacy. We're fighting for each other,
Mhm.
with each other, and excuse me, we're fighting together for intimacy as opposed to against each other.
Mhm. And I really think when there's forgiveness or you're fighting for intimacy, I'll wrap this up. It's whole it's all about holding, it's literally as if I'm holding your heart in my hand. Go like, I failed you. I'm so sorry. In my own love and desire and fight for intimacy, I then want to make this, what do I have to do to make this right? What do I have to do? And it's sometimes it's small things, sometimes big things. It's not a black and white, you pay and then we're good to go. No, it's just you're going to know when your spouse is really sorry when they're like, I'll do it. What do I need to do? Because I want intimacy with you. I'm wrong. It's my fault, whatever. That alone feels to me, when you do that for me, that's justice. That is justice. I feel like, okay, it's been closed. We can move forward. I forgive you. But when you're just like, sorry, yep, and you just kind of move on, you're like, there's no intimacy,
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, one or the other, but let's fight for intimacy.
Justice or intimacy. Which do you
Hmm.
want, Dave?
Always intimacy. Come on, I
I
love you.
wasn't sure what you were. Well, then leave my toes alone.
Well, just don't mess up. I'm
I'm
just
screwed.
yes, yes,
That's
you are.
it's gonna happen. I know it's
Yeah.
gonna.
All right. We got to go because you know what? In 10 minutes, the Rangers are playing. So my husband's got some pacing of the floors to do. And we've got to find out with, all the ESPN analysts are saying right now. So we're going to leave
Mm.
you with that.
I had completely forgotten that game was coming up.
No, you didn't. No. Anyway, with that said, you guys, thanks for listening. I hope this helps. Make sure that you follow us, subscribe, and then share it with other people who could use it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.